Hello, Tre'vell Anderson, journalist, author, and host of What a Day podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Tracy.
Absolutely. I want to start with a little bit of background for those out there who are unfamiliar with all that you do.
Well, if you're unfamiliar, time to get familiar. Um,
Yes.
I am a journalist, an editor, an author. I do 12 million things, is what it comes down to. You mentioned What a Day, which is a daily news podcast. We basically recap the news in 30 minutes every morning, every weekday morning, with a little razzle dazzle on top, I like to say.
Yeah.
That's myself, Josie Duffy Rice, Bianca Arabindi, and Juanita Tolliver. I have a
Mm.
second podcast called Fanti, which, we get into the entertainment, pop culture complex and
Mhm.
complicado things. That's out every Thursday. And then I have a new book coming
Yeah.
out. I have it right here called We See Each Other, A Black
Yeah.
Trans Journey Through
Mhm.
TV and Film,
Oh.
out May 9th.
Oh, well, we will get to that, I promise. Well, congratulations on all that you're doing, and I love that you can do both. You can do news, you can do entertainment, you got it all.
I
Um,
can.
I wanna, talk a little bit more about the What a Day podcast because I know, Tre'vell, that you keep it real. And, at a time when, mainstream media often falls short, would you talk about what it means to you to be able to put out news in a way that is real and also honest?
Yeah, well, I think that audiences are clamoring for authenticity, but like real authenticity, not like the old school journalism, authenticity where like you're reading off a script with some sort of personality
Mhm.
that has been, filtered in or you've been told to do. I
Yeah.
think people are interested
Mhm.
in knowing, the real tea about what's going on and more importantly how it impacts them, right? What they should do with that information, what you should do when you find out that maybe they're trying to ban TikTok in the country or whatever the case may be, what you should do when we see all of these anti-LGBTQ laws being passed across the country.
Mhm.
And I think on What a Day we recognize that, and
Mhm.
we're as the four hosts of us, we are very much interested in just being as authentic ourselves as possible, covering the news. So,
Mhm.
we give news the way you might tell somebody something, at the kitchen table, or over a
Right.
drink,
Yeah.
right? Like
Mhm.
in a way that's like digestible for
Mhm.
folks. We've seen so much that isn't digestible. We've seen so much that is like, trauma focused or poverty focused
Right.
or negative,
Mhm.
particularly if you come from certain communities. And so on What a Day, we want to give you, a little something different.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's incredible. And then, you touched on the trauma a little bit. There is a lot going on right now. So, as someone who is covering the news, how do you touch on that? And, often you are a part of these
hmm
communities that are being attacked. So, how do you touch on that while also taking care of yourself and, finding some joy to discuss?
Yeah, as a black non-binary person of trans experience, as a journalist, so many of those different identity factors end up
Mhm.
being, targets, right, in the work that we do.
Yes.
And so it can be very difficult to cover the very things that are having an adverse effect on your livelihood. I think for me, when I think about self care, when I think about, just making sure that I'm good, a lot of it is about turning to the community that's around me. A lot of it is about making sure that I have people in my corner who I can disengage with, right? We could just sit on the couch and watch, the latest Netflix foolishness,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just unwind, and ultimately recharge, right,
Mhm.
for the fight that is ahead, for the work that is ahead, and making sure that as I'm building my own community, I'm supporting other people and their communities. And what does that self care looks like? I love to eat, so I like to go out to
Mhm.
eat and stuff my face with something I love sitting on the couch and just watching, TV,
Mhm.
taking trips. More people should take vacations, and
Agreed.
completely unwind and unplug. So
Yes.
that's what I try to do more and more.
Yes. Well, good. I'm glad you're doing that. And then would you talk a bit about how critical it is for storytelling, especially at the intersections of your identities?
Hmm.
'Cause you're so many, as you mentioned.
Yeah, baby. Listen, I hit the jackpot. Okay.
Well, and we are grateful for you.
And I love the many identities that I have. But what we know, right, is that historically the communities that I come from haven't been rendered appropriately, whether that's in journalism, in newspapers and magazines, whether that's on TV screens or on film screens. We just haven't seen ourselves in the fullness and the
Mhm,
complexity of our identities. And so for me, storytelling specifically from that intersection is deeply important because it's correcting the record in a
mhm.
lot of ways, right? It's
Right.
building out this broader idea. In writing the book, a lot of it has been, revisiting the archive, looking at the ways in which we
Mhm.
as trans people, we as queer people, we as gender nonconforming people have been rendered in
Yep.
media prior
Mhm.
than this current post transgender tipping point moment that we are
Yeah.
in.
Mhm.
And you'll be surprised, or maybe you won't, about how wrong
Mhm.
so much of that archive is,
Yeah.
because it was a different time period, right? We didn't have the language that we have today. We didn't have the freedoms, some would
Mhm.
say, that we have today. And so part for me in the work that I do is about correcting the record, about
Yeah.
ensuring that when folks look at this moment in history in the archive in years to come, that there's a full picture of the variety of communities that I belong to and that we all belong to.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, Tre'vell, would you talk a little bit about We See Each Other and kind of diving into the history of moving images to, pluck these out? And then, second part, I wonder, when was the first time you saw someone on film or TV who you identified with and said, "Oh, I think that's me," even if it was not an
Yeah.
exact match?
No, absolutely. And that ends up being the reality for most of us, is that it has not been an exact match, right? And so I always go to, my trifecta of people and characters are Miss J. Alexander from America's Next Top Model,
Mhm.
as well as Andre Leon Talley, who came into my consciousness also on
Yes.
America's Next Top Model, one of my possibility models. And then last but not least, the character of Noah Stevens or Stevenson on Noah's Ark,
Noah's Ark, yes. Yep.
yes, on the Patrick Ian Polk
Yeah.
created and directed show.
Mhm.
Those three people, characters, were like early sites of possibility for
Yeah.
me, just to like see what else was out there, what else was possible, of how to exist, as somebody who was coming into not only their queerness and their transness, but also their blackness, at that particular time. And I talk about those individuals in the book, as well. Which, we see each other, a Black trans journey through TV and film, is it's part memoir, part of
Mhm.
me telling my story of how I came to create myself from the images that I saw on screen,
Yeah.
and a partial history of trans visibility on screen since the beginning of
Mhm.
moving images. So you get a little history, but you get a lot of heart and a lot of emotion and a lot of my special razzle dazzle as well.
Incredible, incredible. Well, Tre'vell Anderson, journalist, author, and host of What a Day podcast, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Tracy.
Of course.